good evening, good afternoon, gentlemen, depending on where in the lovely world you are today. Glad to have you with me. This is kind of an interesting topic I've been wanting to do for a little while, and I didn't know how really I was going to tackle it. I'll be quite frank with you, because when we look at the problems that we're having in the world today, it's not just a collapse of morality. I mean, that would be easy to say, oh, everybody, the morals and everybody's belief system and weak men and bad times and promiscuous women. But where does it all stem from? Where does it all come from? And I think it comes from a couple of things. It comes from one thing. It comes from one or two things. It comes from money. It comes from big payouts. It's the elites and the people that meet up at Darvo or wherever it is out there that say, we want to rule the world. Being a billionaire isn't enough. I want to be a trillionaire, and I want to control people, and I want to have all the power, because power is money and money is power. And that trickles down into BlackRock, and that trickles down into the movie industry, and that trickles into financing and banking, and then government, and then Bill Gates, and then the Clintons and all the other people. So it's about money and power. And to get that money and power, which are the one or two things that are kind of go hand in hand, to get that, they need to be able to control the narrative and to control society and to control where everything goes. And so they came out and they said, boys can be girls, girls can be boys, exercise is bad for you, eating these crappy foods is fine. And that's half of it. And that's kind of the destruction of men and just people's health in general, so that they can make cheaper, crappy food and make more money on that end. And they can sell you the medications that'll never make you healthy, but they make you feel better as long as you're taking the medicines. And then you get Ozempic so you can lose weight. And they can sell you the Ozempic, and all the Hollywood people get on it and they brag how wonderful it is. And it all boils down to you being sick, them being rich, them being, I don't know, in power, and you being powerless. And part of that equation is promiscuous women. They came out and said promiscuity is fine. Promiscuity and women sleeping around and women selling themselves and degrading themselves for every nickel they can make, that is perfectly fine. No problems with it. And why? Because there's money to be made from OnlyFools and from using women and putting this crap on TV. There's money to be made. So what if it destroys women's lives, like little old Lily Phillips from last week, the videos I did about her destroying herself, and everybody cheered it on and cheers that kind of work on until she starts crying and realizes she might have made a terrible mistake. And then instead of saying, maybe we need to take a second look at our destruction of the nuclear family and are saying that, you know, this kind of work is real work and women should be able to sell themselves, instead of self-reflecting, they come out and say, nah, it's the men's fault. Well, I got a lot to cover on all of this. Something that I've noticed that is very strange is that when the bad people make money and the bad people try to get power to do the wrong thing, everybody's very mad about it. But then when people want to come out and do the right thing and try to, a perfect example, whether you like them or not, Tim Pool, whether you like him or not, Joe Rogan, whether you like the Daily Wire, you may not like any of those people. I understand that. But when they come out with a message of we need the nuclear family and we need to have children and we need to, myself and many of you, we attack them. We say, you're saying that if men don't get married and don't have children, they're not real men. How dare you?
How dare you?
Well, you're wrong, and therefore I hate you. But at least they're trying to bring back culture. At least they're trying to bring back society, even if their ways about it are twisted, even if their belief system is overly optimistic. At least they're trying. You know, I crap on Matt Walsh as much as the rest of them, but Matt Walsh has like 5 or 6 kids. He's a good dad. He's still married. He has a family. And he says everybody should live like him. Well, we can't, obviously, because of all the other problems that we have with women dating and their promiscuity and everything else. But at least they're trying to say, let's go in the right direction. And Antonio Colemenares, the CEO that I talked to, he's trying to do the right thing. I think he's got a great idea ahead of him. And he sees the destruction of everything that's going on around us. And he says, hey, let's fix this. And that's what I talked to him about. So we'll get to that interview here shortly. First, I'm going to start off with this. You know, RFK was a Democrat darling, and 10 to 15% of Democrats were going to vote for him. And he's healthy, and he wants to clean up our food, and he wants to get rid of all the medications and the things that are destroying us, some of the materials that are in the vaccines. And he says, let's take a look at this. Let's examine, let's get the crap out of our food. And what happens? Democrats come out and attack him. Why? Why don't the Democrats want us to have healthy food? Why don't the Democrats want us to look into big pharma and see all the stuff that they're putting into this, because autism rates are skyrocketing and kids are getting messed up with the ADHD, and little young men are growing up being kind of feminized and weak. How dare you want to look into this stuff? And from MSN, corporate media unleashes on RFK Jr. after HHS secretary appointment. How dare you want to talk bad about seed oils and look into the food industry? See, it's okay if the bad guys are making money, because then they get people elected, and then our government is full of bad guys. And then these corporations are full of bad guys. And in the meantime, we're getting sick and we're being unhealthy. And again, this video, we're going to get into the easy women and all that stuff, but there's so much to talk about because it's all one big bubble of crap. It's weakening of men. It's poisoning our foods. It's making us sick. It's big pharma selling us the cures. It's easy women. It's men that are strong and don't like this stuff, which is red pill community. They're evil. It's all in the same thing. So they come out and attack RFK because he wants to look at our food. And in the meantime, this is the guy they're making fun of, right? This is RFK. He's, 70 years old. He takes testosterone therapy. He's still got muscles. He's still working out. He's still healthy. This is him bench pressing. And I'm only going to touch on this. This isn't an RFK video. But they show him bench pressing. And the guy's muscular, and he's almost got a six-pack at, 70 some odd years old. Same thing here. Look, he's got muscle definition, and he's able to do push-ups where Joe Biden can barely breathe. I mean, so they just come out, and here's a healthy guy. And in the meantime, here's Belgian health minister, Maggie de Block. So this person can tell you about health. This person is who that you should listen to, that the government put in. Listen to her about your diet. Listen to her about how to be strong men. Listen to her about masculinity and all the foods you should be eating. Don't listen to this guy. Whatever you do, don't listen to this guy. And then you've got the media coming out. Don't overdo it. Why too much exercise may be a bad thing. 10 reasons exercise is bad for you. White supreme origins of exercise and 6 other surprising facts about the history of U.S. physical fitness. Don't lift any weights, men, or you might be one of the white supreme people. Gym bros. This is actually a positive article. This is a positive article. Gym bros more likely to be right-wing assholes. Science confirms. Well, we have a winner. What does that tell you?
Ding, ding, ding. What do we have for her, Johnny?
Yeah, that means we probably should be working out a lot more and being a right-wing a-hole and getting muscle, because these guys are actually the chads that the promiscuous women we're going to be talking about later on, they're the ones that they're going to likely sleep with and ditch them and move on to another woman. And sugar, is it really bad for you? Well, it depends. It's all about keeping us weak, guys. That's the whole thing. That's the whole thing that's important. And this is from Global Pediatrics just a couple years ago. And this is the point really that it boils down to, and which is why I say it's money that makes the world go round. They know they're giving us food that makes us sick. They know that there's a lot of tests that are not being conducted on the medicines we're getting. They come out, they release a medicine, they tell you it's good for you. Oopsie doopsie. It turns out we have to recall it and just look into Just look into some of these pharmaceutical companies and the meds they put out. The oopsie, turns out this is really bad for you and they have to recall. Look into the jab and the bug. I know a lot of people were hating on me when I said do the research yourself. Turns out there's a lot of people that are still having some heart problems after the fact. And now they're pulling it from the market. That's right. They're pulling some of it from the market, even after they told you you had to have it or else you couldn't work at your job anymore. And now we have it in our food, endocrine disruptors in food and their effects on infant health. So now they're finding out that it's not just, us eating all the ultra-processed food. It's in baby formula. It's in water. It's in kids' cereals. They're starting right from the cradle to make us sick and make us weak and make us feel like crap. 15 foods that lower testosterone. Alcohol, soy, sugars, sodas, refined grains, which is in most of the ultra-processed food, vegetable oils that's in all the ultra-processed food, margarine, which is just cold vegetable oil, trans fats, it's in all the food, fast food, processed meat. That's all the diets. And this is right from testosterone.org. This is what the most diets consist of now. Well, I'm going to talk about, I've got this interview that I want to play, and I recorded it yesterday because I've been working on my house. I'm building my patio, and it's moving big stones and putting them in position, and I wish I could say I was doing it. I wish I could say, I'm just out there linking my fingers and deadlifting these 300-pound blocks of stone to put them in place. I'm not that guy. I'm not that guy. But I do have a crew working over there, and I'm over there hanging out with them, and I'm directing because it's my patio. What can I say? But I have this interview, and he brings up some really key points about it's about destroying society. It's about destroying foods. It's about destroying your endocrine system. I'm going to play this. It's about, I think, 20 minutes. The poor guy, I edited this down. I had him captive for like an hour. And I just was like, I'm asking more and more questions about food. And at a certain point, I'm like, I know I got to let you go, man. But this stuff fascinates me because it's really the future of where men are going. Are we going to just say like, screw it, I'm going to eat the food. I'm going to let my testosterone get lower. Who cares? I'm going to separate from society, let it all burn down, which is really, let's face it, 90% of our views on it. But if we are going to let it watch it all burn down, at least we need to take care of ourselves while it's burning down. Like, at least we have to be healthy because I'll be honest with you, I don't want to be 55, 60 years old and have to go in to see some woke doctor that asks me if I'm a man before they start taking x-rays and deciding what medicines. Like, you have to be healthy or else you're going to fall into the healthcare system that is now full of a bunch of woke idiots that are graduating because they wrote a degree on why whiteness is bad and why black people are awesome. Now give me my PhD. I don't think that's the people I want to leave my health in the hands of. So I'm looking into taking care of myself. And that's what's kind of gotten me down this road. So we're going to listen to this interview, and then we're going to jump into Sex and Culture from J.D. Unwin. And that's about basically the promiscuity of women and how every single society that lets their women become promiscuous, collapse or is taken over. And I talk about a little bit about that in the interview. So let me play the interview, and then we'll get back to this. I'll be right here with you, and I'll be reading chat as we go here. So we were just talking about, and I decided, let's hit record on this so my viewers can see this as well. We're talking about traveling and different cultures and dating and the feminization of everything, but you specifically focus on supplements and things for men and masculinity and being strong. What we were just talking about is how everything seems to be Hollywood's putting men in dresses, and the chemicals in the foods that we've got, they know that it is kind of feminizing men. They seem fine with it, if nothing, if they don't promote it. What do you think? Do you think that was by accident? So in other words, like, companies are for profit, right? They care about making money.
Yeah.
They dump these chemicals. Everything is ultra processed. Do you think the result of the chemical portion of this, the feminization of men and the plastics and all this other stuff, Do you think that's a happy accident, or do you think that's something they're actually kind of targeting? Because even Alex Jones came out, way back when with the turning the frogs gay and all that stuff.
And that turning the frogs gay is actually atrazine, and atrazine is the second most commonly used pesticide in the U.S. It's banned in over 40 countries, and it's the second most commonly used pesticide in the U.S. And that's an actual thing. They did a study. They did a study with the frogs, and I think it was, I don't know exactly what percentage, but a large portion of them turned into female frogs and lay fertile eggs. So even if it's let's say it was by accident, okay, we didn't know that BPA's in plastics, or we didn't know that atrazine could potentially disrupt the endocrine system. Now we do know that, and it's still there.
Right.
So, okay, let's say it started by accident, but what's going on now? Is it still an accident?
If you think about it, whether it's Monsanto or all these other chemicals and the GMO foods and all that stuff, maybe it's not. I don't think, like you say, I don't know if it was an accident, but they definitely know it's there. But is the profit and the money they're making more important than actually fixing the problem? Or are they now at this point saying, well, not only are we making the money and not only are we fixing the problem, but also men are becoming weaker and more feminine, and we can push all this other stuff on them as well?
I think, well, I'm, for example, Venezuelan. I had to move to the U.S. when I was 13 because my father's company got nationalized by the Venezuelan dictatorship. And I think from what I saw in that experience and how I was basically brought up in a dictatorship, a communist dictatorship, I think that this goes in line with the communist agenda. I've broken it down into what they do. And I think the first thing they do is to take away the nuclear family. I think a lot of what they're doing with schools and sort of confusing the kids in their gender identity, getting them to fight against their parents or being independent is really trying to do that, taking away the nuclear family. Then they weaken the population either by starving them, which is what they do in my country. We starve you to death, and then we give you a little bolsa clap, which has basic necessities. So now you depend on that little bag in order not to starve. I don't think they could do that in the US, but I think they're doing that. The flip side of that is the feminization. Is the estrogenic chemicals in our food. It's the Hollywood pushing the woke agenda. It's the DEI practices that they push in the corporate world. So I think that, okay, they said we can't starve people. Let's weaken them. Let's weaken the able-bodied men this other way. And then they censor opposing views. We saw what they did with the Hunter Biden laptop. Mark Zuckerberg even came out and said what they did. And we saw when Elon Musk bought X, all the crap that was there, quite frankly. And then after they do all that, they nationalize all private industries and take away people's guns. That's exactly what they did in Venezuela. They took away people's guns, and then they started nationalizing private industries. Now you can't fight back. And now the majority of the population is starving to death. Nobody has guns. They're taking away people's businesses, and nobody can fight back.
Right. Almost like the further down the road you get, the harder it is to fix the problem. So
exactly.
I have Canadian fans and fans all over the world. And Americans kind of give them crap because you look at Canada, they just added more gun rules and more gun laws. And then you go and look at Australia and what they did with the lockdowns with the, COVID and all that stuff, and actually talking about putting people in camps. And when you think about it, releasing your Second Amendment, which we have here in the United States, but your ability to defend yourself, even once that's gone, men can still overthrow a government. I mean, if you think about it, whether they want to, ransack or shut down shipping lanes or whatever else. But when you get to the point where men don't only fight back, but they start agreeing with everything that's going on, and that usually stems from weak-minded people, weak physical people, people that agree with the machinations of the government. So if they're doing this with our food and all that stuff, you've started Black Forest, and you obviously have the supplements and things like that. But made you decide this was the right way to fight back against all of this stuff? Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. I obviously saw what was going on with testosterone levels. They've been decreasing exponentially, and that leads to the weaker, the more docile, the more feminized men. So if we want to counteract all these estrogenic chemicals, we need some sort of help. Additionally, when I was younger, I had some experiences with plant medicine. I did some mushrooms, and I saw the power behind nature. And I realized, okay, we can fight back using what's hidden in nature, hence the name Black Forest, in order to counteract these estrogenic chemicals and to counteract all the bullshit, quite frankly, that they're throwing our way. So everything that we formulate in Black Forest supplements, our testosterone booster, our main one is Terkesterone with Tankadali. I'd love to get into how it works to counteract against this. But the whole idea and the premise behind it is, okay, my experience with plant medicine showed me how powerful plants can be. Then I developed this algorithm to sort of detect market trends, see what's working for other people, see what people are talking about online. And with that algorithm and with our product development team, we're able to find these novel and this sort of hidden extracts that I realize are a great way to fight back against these forces. And yeah, I do believe that we don't have to go the big pharma, the FDA route, that finding things amongst nature and sort of doing our supplement stack to counteract this can also be very beneficial. So that's why we started Black Forest supplements. They want you weak and docile, and we want you to fight back. That's the main goal right there.
When I traveled to Peru, I spent roughly about a month, maybe a month and a half in Peru, a little bit of time in Lima, and I went in Cusco, of course. And when I went out to the rainforest out there, I did an ayahuasca, which was very interesting. I didn't have the same reactions that a lot of other people did, but like if we ate very natural foods, no salt, it was very plain for an American palate. When we're going through the woods and they're showing us, how they came up across ayahuasca and how they learned about the plants and the medicines. Like, for example, if you have ED, if the plumbing downstairs isn't quite as excitable, it's funny, they just walk up and chop down a little vine or something or other and take shavings off of it and make a tea out of it. And they said, drink this. And same thing if you have a headache, and same thing if you have, stomach issues. We'll just leave it at that. Traveler's runs, as we called it. They almost seem to have a very natural kind of answer for a lot of it. And then through modern science, and I from my understanding, they still get a lot of these basic elements, such as these plants or these chemicals from nature in the Amazon or in South America for a lot of medicines. So tell me a little bit more about what your experience is with that, because that's where my knowledge ends. Beyond there, I don't know anything more about it.
Yeah, what happens quite particularly in the US is that the FDA and big pharmaceutical companies, they're embedded with each other. They've done various studies. One of them, for example, they tracked FDA reviewers, and they saw where they went to work after they left their tenure in the FDA. And in a 10-year period, I think 57% of them went to work for big pharmaceutical companies, either as consultants or directly as employees. So this revolving door, what they do here is they're working as a unit, and they try to everything that they don't have patented, every drug that it's not within their asset class, they try to restrict. They try people to shy away. Okay, let's not take terkesterone or Tankadali to protect our testosterone levels. Let's not take plant medicine to potentially decrease anxiety or depression, because they don't profit from that. They actively try and restrict. So that's what I've noticed personally. And I think the supplement route is a more self-directed route, where one can do their own research and find things that the doctor is not necessarily prescribing, because doctors, as you know, are affiliates of big pharmaceutical companies. They get a affiliate percentage of each sale of a pharmaceutical drug. So they have vested interests there. It's not like I'm bashing doctors. There's obviously great doctors out there, but they're all acting as a unit. So I think it's important that we take health into our own hands. We do our own research, and we look for these natural alternatives that are not necessarily being promoted because big pharmaceutical companies don't have the patents, or they don't have them in their asset portfolio.
Okay, so let's take, for example, we'll start with the real basics. You take your water, you run it through a charcoal filter, even if you're in a city or anything like that with tap water, run it through a filter. Charcoal filters will help remove a lot of these problems. Maybe you eat some, stay away from the processed, ultra-processed foods. But then when you're talking about, even if you get organic, in many cases, organic foods still can have certain hormones, because like you say, the FDA it has their hands in anything and everything. So let's say we remove the vast majority of this, and so now we don't have anything to counteract. Just for argument's sake, we're back to nature. We're back to being natural. We know lifting weights. We know eating, natural beef, meats, products, things like that. Vegans have very high problems with proteins because you have to almost supplement because it's very hard to get all that stuff. So if we've got a good workout regime, we're eating right, we're eating the healthy foods, we're drinking the water, how do these supplements add on to that? Or how do they, so instead of counteracting the bad, let's just say we could get rid of the bad, how do they supplement so that they continue to help you?
For sure. You're saying everything that you're saying is great ways to sort of stop these estrogenic chemicals from initially getting into the body. But we also have to take into account that this junk we've been consuming since we were kids. Even if we start lifting weights, we start getting high quality sleep, we start sunbathing for 30 minutes, that the damage has been done. So I think we need that little extra kick to sort of clean our system. And for example, with Turkesterone with Tonkat Ali, I have it right here, take it daily. The way they found Turkesterone was that the Russians started using it in the 1980s to get a one-up in the Olympics, because Turkesterone is not banned by WADA. Hence, it doesn't come up in the steroid test that they do for the Olympics. And the way Turkesterone works is that the chemical structure of the Turkesterone molecule is very similar to the chemical structure of the testosterone molecule. So it tricks your body into believing it has more testosterone, but in reality, it doesn't. So your hormonal balance is not affected. You don't have the negative side effects of, for example, steroids, that you start taking TRT, now you need to take TRT for life. And because you don't necessarily have the testosterone per se, it's just like tricking your body, sort of like your name, there's a little joker. And Tonkat Ali is a natural herb that has been used for centuries, ever since Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan, they say that he took Sistanch and Tonkat Ali on a daily basis, and that's why he had, 200 kids, because of his high libido.
200,000 kids, probably, by the time you go through all the generations.
200,000 kids or something. I think he's the person with the most amount of kids, and like 7% of Asia is in his direct lineage. But we paired those two because Turkesterone acts in a way where it tricks the body, and Tonkat Ali acts in a way that actually increases the testosterone. So you get heavier loads, your sperm health is better. And if you take care of really counteracting all these estrogenic chemicals, not touching plastics ever, not brushing your teeth with plastic, not touching receipts, because receipts have BPAs. BPAs, I don't even know exactly where they, aside from plastics and receipts and all of that, I don't know where else they are. Some say shampoos have microplastics. Now, microplastics quite literally everywhere. Even if you tried to get away from it, you couldn't. So we sell things to not only counteract, but really sort of clean up everything that's been happening to you since you were a kid. Because we weren't raised in farms, or maybe you were, but then you moved to a city. Our lifestyles, just living a normal life, will lead you to get all these estrogenic chemicals that are already there, even if you do your best. So that's why we sell the supplements, so that you can counteract something that's quite literally there.
Okay, that makes sense. I think, the video that I'm going to incorporate this interview into, it's called it's the collapse. JD Unwin did a study, and it's collapse of societies. And basically every single he looked back over the course of 5,000 years across 80 societies, and every society that allowed both the men to get weak and the women to become promiscuous, all of them without fail either ended up collapsing completely or being taken over by another stronger, group of individuals. So, me personally, I think on an individual basis, we need to fix things for your own health. I mean, obviously I'm a guy that I don't want to age, or no one really wants to age. But I think the bigger struggle that is more important is that men stay stoic and strong and intelligent and have the wherewithal to kind of fight back against all the madness that's being pushed on us. And the good news is I do think some of that is happening. If you look at the rejection of Hollywood, the rejection of these movies that are crashing and burning, the video game industry is going through it, music industry. I think there's a big enough portion of men out there that are kind of pushing back against that. So maybe that's the good news. And then, on top of that, if we keep our individual health and our own personal strength up, and we surround ourselves with like-minded people, I think ultimately that'll probably be the best way as an individual basis we can push back against the madness, voting with your dollars and keeping yourself healthy, really.
Yeah, and I wanted to take a moment, I know it's not an ad or anything, but to offer a promotion to your viewers. I love doing that every time we do interviews, just so that after hearing what the products can do, and after knowing the problem, obviously everybody that watches your show is well aware of the feminization of men and what they're trying to do with us, with Hollywood and all that. Thankfully, we're fighting back. I think Donald Trump winning the election and RFK being the head of the HHS are great steps towards the right direction. But yeah, we just wanted to take a moment to offer you guys and your followers individually a buy one, get one free Turkesterone with Tonkan Ali, so they could take advantage of that. I know during Christmas is not particularly the best time to take supplements, but you can buy them now and start taking them in January. I want to offer this promotion to your viewers for 48 hours. So if you guys really want to take advantage of this and counteract these estrogenic chemicals and vote with your dollars, we are, as of now, we're in a battle with the FDA for another one of our products, NMN. And we really care about consumers' right to choose what's best for their health and stopping Big Pharma from monopolizing things that could be beneficial to everyone and just ramping up the prices. So we're actively fighting against that. And we're also actively trying to fight against the feminization of men. So if those are things that you guys resonate with, we would obviously appreciate your support. And we're just here to try and help and try and make this world a better place. Awesome. And get rid of all this DEI bullshit that's going around. And that, quite frankly, I don't think it's benefiting anyone.
Awesome. I know you're limited on time, but I do quickly want to ask, the NMN, why is the FDA and the federal government going so hard against that one product?
This particular one, they want to turn it into the first prescription anti-aging drug in history. What this guy in Harvard called Dr. David Sinclair, what he realized that as we age, NAD plus levels drop. And that's one of the main reasons why we see the effects of aging. He started doing some mice studies, and then he did some human studies. If you could look up mice that took NMN, like identical twin mice, one took NMN and one didn't. One looks like old and crippled, and the other one's beautiful, like brand new. Then he saw the potential in mice. Then he started studying it in humans, started seeing similar effects. And not to that extent, but he really started seeing people aging more gracefully. All has to do with like the mitochondrial stuff. I don't want to get bogged down in the science, but what he realized was that NMN is so powerful that he wanted to monopolize it. So he created this new big pharmaceutical company called Metro Biotech, and they're the ones that are trying to monopolize NMN. They want to call it MIB 626 and sort of monopolize it. Tell all the supplement brands that are selling it, you can't sell it anymore because it's a drug now, and they could charge whatever they want. Now you need to go to the doctor, get a prescription in order to start taking NMN. And as I said, the FDA and big pharmaceutical companies revolving door, basically acting as a unit. What they tried to do is issue a statement that nobody else could sell NMN if they're not Metro Biotech. And what we did is that alongside other NMN brands and Natural Products Association, we got together and we sued the FDA. And we had our first big win. I think it was like right when Trump won and RFK was announced head of the HHS. That exact same day, or I think it was 24 hours later, they said that the FDA can't come after companies selling NMN until the class action lawsuit gets settled. So it's not like that we're not done yet, but it's the first big win. And I honestly think that with this new administration, they're not going to allow the FDA to just come and monopolize something that's already working and something that's already in the free market in order to try and monopolize it, turn it into the first prescription anti-aging drug, and just line their pockets with money.
Well, good luck on that, because, you know, after reading, and I did my own research on it, and again, I know you're pressed for time, so I apologize, but I like hearing this information firsthand. The NAD has to be taken directly in the blood through doctor's visit, and they basically hook you up to a bag and drain it in you. That's the NAD, but the NMN, that kind of incentivizes the body to create its own NAD. Do I have that correct?
NMN is an NAD plus precursor. So when you take it, it turns into NMN in the body. So that you can't necessarily take NAD per se, or if you do take it, it's less effective. When you take NMN, it turns into NAD.
Okay. And you don't need
in the body.
And you don't need the doctor's
and you don't need the
visits,
needles. It's
right.
more affordable. And it's what Dr. David Sinclair used in his studies. And I think the main reason why they're going against NMN specifically, it's quite frankly because it's the best NAD booster.
Well, and you can take it at your house without the doctor visit, and giving the big corporations their money, basically.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, sir, thank you very much. Thank you very much for hopping in here and answering some of these questions. I appreciate you and the knowledge that you kind of bring, and the fact that you're aware of what's going on and are actively trying to fix it. And you know, I hope you good success with your business and everything that you're trying to do, and I hope that works out well for you.
I'm a big fan of the show. I'll continue to be a sponsor, and hopefully we can grow together. I feel like we're in the right side of history, and that we're really trying to fight against the evils that be. So the more of us that we can get together, and the more of us that we can join sort of this purpose, I think the better country and the better world that we'll have. So I appreciate you, man. And I appreciate you having me on the show. And good luck on your travels. Let me know if you're going to do any more of that. I would love to hear your stories and see what else you find out there.
Well, once my house is done, I got a couple other projects I'm working on. But at some point, I'd like to do another lap around the globe. I don't know how I'll do my content and my work when I'm doing that, but maybe it'll be a nice vacation for a little while. But I appreciate you stopping in today.
No, I appreciate you. And I would love, for you to tell me, dude, you have to visit this, and that. And I'm a big traveler myself. So I would love to really get out there and see what solutions we can find, whether it be with indigenous tribes or in different cultures, things that they're taking for specific reasons. I'm fascinated by that. So I appreciate you for traveling the world and sharing that knowledge with everyone, man.
Great. Thank you very much. And I'd like to thank Antonio again. He's a very smart guy, and I didn't put all of it in the video because we probably talked for about 15 or 20 minutes beforehand. And I said, because, when you do a meetup like that, I don't interview many people, as you know, so I'm about as far away from professional as you can get doing that kind of stuff. And we linked up and we started talking. We're talking about all these things and these effects. And I said, oh, geez, let me let me hit the record button. So we did miss a lot of the conversation, and what he was saying is I think kind of dead on, that the government agencies we have, whether it's the FDA, whether it's the food, whether it's pharma, they're all kind of in bed with each other, to where if you're working for the FDA, you go become you either work for you get on a position on a board for pharma, or you become a lobbyist to then represent pharma. So you used to be with the FDA, now you're a lobbyist that works for big pharma, that goes to the Congress and the senators and tries to convince them to vote a certain way. And it's all about the money, and it's all about the power that's within these own organizations. And so the study that he was referencing to, I actually found it, and I'll finish this segment on that. But I think it's important that we support, not necessarily, we need to support not necessarily everybody that comes our way, but the ones that are doing it the right way. That's why I'm a fan of RFK. I'm not a Democrat. You guys know me. I'm a pretty anarcho-capitalist, like free-loving dude of you do you. But the you do you crowd has gotten us into a really bad place because they're chasing after the dollars, right? And I became a fan of RFK because he says, let's clean up things. So we do need to support people like RFK. I think we, at least so far, my trust is believing that Musk will do the right thing, that Trump will do the right thing, that the people that he's putting in place will do the right thing. We do need to push back on Hollywood. We do need to push back on big pharma. We need to push back, and we vote with our dollars, and so I think that's important. Me personally, I do support, I'm going to be clear about this so you guys don't have any doubts. I support Black Forest. I'm a believer of their product. And that's one of the reasons why when he said, hey, I watch your content, I said, let's talk about this. You know a lot more about this than I do. And I want to get, some insider knowledge on this and what your research has found. And it really does look like they're trying to weaken men, not only through social media with things like this. I have a screenshot with things like this from the Inquirer. Men's cuddling group aims to redefine masculinity and heal trauma. And it shows a picture of, 50 some odd year old dudes. One's a Mormon father. Oh, he's religious. Another's a married father of 3. Another's a 62-year-old retiree. Oh, look, everybody. Cuddle groups are acceptable. And working out is negative. And it's masculine. Real men wear makeup. And real men wear skirts. And they throw Hollywood actors into skirts. And, all of this stuff is designed to chip away at what is traditionally masculine. And so I think those that are pushing back against this do deserve our support. And that's how we're going to win this war eventually. And this overview of the endocrine disruptors in food and their effects on infant health is that they say children, especially developing fetuses and infants, are more likely to be affected by the chemicals than adults. We intake through food as primary pathways for endocrine disruptors in the body. And so they're found in food, they're found in shampoos, they're found in water. That's why I have such a big push right now, for myself included, eating healthier, drinking, filtering your water. And that doesn't mean buying bottled water from a plant, because all they're doing is basically turning off the Coca-Cola syrup and the sugars, and they're just letting tap water go into bottles, and then they're selling that to you for $1 or $2 a bottle. Now, yes, there's spring water and everything like that, but it's not been filtered. Me, I've got a filtration system that's going into my new house. I filter all my water through charcoal filters. If a charcoal filter company wants to sponsor me, great. And I'm trying to clean up my diet by, yes, eating healthier, but that you can only do that to a point, because a lot of this damage is in so much of the foods we eat, so much of the waters we drink, and the medicines that we take, that you almost have to think it's by design. And so this damage does occur when you're young now. Now, maybe not so much when I was, 52-year-old Joker was a youngster. Maybe not so much then, but now they're even finding fentanyl and pregnancy. What's the pill? The estrogens in the pregnancy pills. They're finding that in just tap water now. They're finding microplastics in dolphins and in our meat. So there is a point in time where you say, how am I going to fight back against this? So I want you guys to be aware of this, because I want you to be healthy enough. You don't have to go to one of these woke doctors and get bad health care. Let's try to clean up our lives before we need it, and so that we're healthier. And the second part of this is the promiscuity of women. And this is the book, I looked it up. It's called Sex and Culture. It was written in 1934. We didn't have much woke in 1934. J.D. Unwin was Joseph Daniel Unwin, an English ethnologist, is how they pronounce it, and social anthropologist at Oxford University and Cambridge University. And he served during World War I, World War I in 1914. He was in the tank corps. He got twice wounded with a military cross. So I'd say this is kind of a tough-based guy. And he did studies and wrote on this. And you can look that up. This is a good summary that's been written by Kirk Dunstan. And it's called Thoughts About God, Truth, and Beauty, J.D. Unwin, and Why Sexual Morality May Be Far More Important Than You Ever Thought. And I found this fascinating because when you go back 5,000 years, you go back across 80 different societies, and you say the moment that women become promiscuous, they collapse. And there might be a couple reasons for that, if we're being honest. I think we're seeing some of it now, that the blue-pilled guys that still think they can find a wife, they want to get married, they are hearing that women want weak, effeminate men that want to cuddle and share their emotions and their feelings, and that's what really women want. That promotes the feminization of men and making men weak. Yet the women will marry those men, and those men will be blue-pilled providers, while the Chad Chaddingtons out there, the masculine men, they're the ones sleeping with the women. They're the ones having the kids with the women, and then they're bouncing and they're leaving these blue pill guys to raise the kids with their hard income, and they should be happy to have these leftover women. I think that is part of it. And so men are starting to chase the wrong things instead of chasing higher goals, or even if you're not religious, a belief in the sciences and a belief in mathematics and the higher learning. When you're married and you have a family and you don't think about the nuclear family anymore, and your home life is healthy, you can focus on the bigger things in the world. But what happens if you have strife at home? What happens if you're demoralized? What happens if you're unhappy? You're no longer thinking about the bigger theories and problems of the world. You're focused on the minutia and the stupid things that basically women think about and women's drama. And so you're not looking to the bigger pictures. He says a few days ago, this is from, again, Kirk Dunstan. I instead of summarizing, I often read writers, because writers sum up my thoughts better than I can, because I write like a monkey with a broken pencil. He says, a few days ago, I finished studying Sex and Culture for the second time. It's a remarkable book summarizing a lifetime of research by Oxford social anthropologist J.D. Unwin. The 600-plus page book is, in Unwin's word, only a summary of his research. 7 volumes would be required to lay it all out. His writings suggest he was a rationalist. He believed that science is our ultimate tool of inquiry. It appears he was not a religious man. As I went through what he found, I repeatedly reminded of the thought I had as a philosophy student. Let me increase the size here so you can see the text and read along with me if you so desire. He said, I was repeatedly reminded of a thought I had as a philosophy student. Some moral laws may be designed to minimize human suffering and maximize human flourishing long term. Unwin examines the data from 86 societies and civilizations to see if there is a relationship between sexual freedom and the flourishing of cultures. What makes the book especially interesting is that we in the West underwent a sexual revolution in the late 1960s, 70s, and 80s, and are now in position to test the conclusions he arrived at more than 40 years earlier. Unwin's cultural categories. Unwin describes 4 great patterns of human culture and degrees of flourishing measured in terms of architecture, art, engineering, literature, agriculture, and so forth. The primary criterion for classification was how they related to the natural world and the forces it contains. Now, I'm going to read through this just briefly, and then I'll give kind of a summary of my thoughts here. Zoistic, entirely self-focused on day-to-day life, wants and needs with no interest in understanding nature, described it as a dead culture or inert. Monistic, a culture superstitious beliefs and or special treatment of the dead to cope with the natural world. Deistic, attribute the powers of nature to God or gods. Rationalistic, the rational thinking to understand nature and to make day-to-day decisions. So, with these four summaries alone, you can look at monistic, for example, superstitious beliefs and treatment of the dead to cope with the natural world. That could be some of the tribes in Africa. That could be maybe some South African or South American cultures. Obviously, like Latinos, Mexicans specifically have Dios de la Muerta, I think it is, or Dios de la Muerta. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Day of the Dead. There are, and I'm not using that as the penultimate, but that's an example of where you think about your past and you celebrate the dead in one way or another. Deistic, which is nature to God or gods. Rationalistic, using thinking and rational thinking to understand nature. The rationalistic is where supposedly we were headed, but instead we've reverted to zeistic, which is entirely self-focused on day-to-day life, our day-to-day wants and needs, with no interest in understanding nature, described as a dead culture or inert. Now, how does that tie to today? People are only worried about immediate needs, lust over love, money over philanthropy, worrying about my happiness versus the happiness of perhaps the generations to come, worrying about your next hookup and short-term date versus long-term marriage, a healthy family, and children. And that goes so far as not just us as men. I think many of us would say, I would like to be married to a good woman. I would like to have a family. I would like to have society support that, but instead it supports divorce, and it supports child custody, and it supports baby deletion, and it supports short-term thinking versus long-term drawn-out thought process. In other words, I will plant the tree for the generations to come, not for myself, where today people are more of the mindset of, I'm going to cut that tree down because it's ruining my view of the mountains or whatever, right? So he says, degrees of sexual restraint were divided into two major categories, prenuptial and postnuptial. Prenuptial categories were prenuptial meaning before marriage, postnuptial meaning after. I only explain that for those of you whose English is not your first language, because again, I know I have a lot of foreign viewers. Complete sexual freedom, no prenuptial restraints at all. Irregular or occasional restraint, cultural regulations require an occasional period of abstinence. Strict chastity, remain a virgin until married. So those are the three before or prenuptial, before marriage. So now we have a complete sexual freedom with small subsets of laws, meaning there is an age to consent, right? There's an age to participate. However, if you look in the Middle East, there is no age. Sometimes you see these Muslims marrying young girls as low as 9, 8, 7, 6. So that all kind of falls into one. Then you have post categories. Modified monogamy, one spouse at a time, but association can be terminated by either party. That is current marriage. Because now a woman can initiate divorce, men can initiate divorce. You don't need a reason. That's modified monogamy. But the problem is even modified monogamy is being sidelined in lieu of complete sexual freedom. They're trying to even tear down marriage. And we tear down marriage, at least as we talk about it, as men going their own way or guys that decide not to get married and cohabitate and all that stuff. We're disassociating because of the current laws and because of the current women that are in the dating society that we live in. That would be because of their complete sexual freedom. That would be because of the rules of this modified monogamy that are not doing well for men. Again, I don't put most of this on we men that decide not to participate. I don't look at us as the problem causers. I look at us as the problem solvers. I look at us as the ones that are not participating in the broken system. We're not the reason the system is broken. That's how I view myself, and that's how I view most of you, and I think you would probably agree with that. Then there's modified polygamy. Men can have more than one wife, but a wife is free to leave her husband. I'm not sure which societies have that currently. The absolute monogamy, only one spouse permitted for life or until death in some cultures. And then there's absolute polygamy. Men can have more than one wife, but wives must confine their sexual qualities, or i.e. activities, to their husband for the whole of their lives. That is currently the Middle East, or good large portions of the Middle East. Now, if we look at which cultures are growing, which cultures are starting to dominate, it would be absolute polygamy, which is men can have more than one wife. You look at the Middle East, they're having multiple wives, but the wives are not free to leave the husbands. They're tied to the husbands for lives. They're having very large families. They're growing so much so that they're now moving into Ireland, Scotland, England, France. They're becoming a dominant force in these previous westernized countries. And the countries that are doing the modified monogamy and are doing the complete sexual freedom, they're losing ground because they're being so open-minded as to let these other cultures infiltrate and become strong and popular in their cultures itself. And that it goes back to what J.D. Unwin talks about. The Western societies that have allowed this complete sexual freedom, men are no longer participating. Women are sleeping around and being promiscuous. They're slowly being invaded by a culture that has absolute polygamy, that is growing, that where men are having more than one wife, and that wife is tied to that one man. So he says, what did he find? He said, I have prepared a 26-page collection of quotes from his book to summarize his findings. But even that would leave you with a significant underappreciation of the rigor and fascinating details revealed in data from 86 cultures. Here's a few of his most significant findings. The effect of sexual constraints. Increased sexual constraints, either pre- or post-nuptial, always leads to increased flourishing of a culture. Conversely, increased sexual freedom always led to the collapse of a culture 3 generations later. So he says, whether pre or post nuptial, the more constraints, the more flourishing of a culture. Now you can crap on Muslims and the marriage to the age of the brides. You can crap on them for having multiple wives, but there's a lot of constraint in that, meaning there are laws that they follow, and they are strict laws. And if you follow those laws, it leads to flourishing. If there are fewer laws, i.e., women can divorce for no reason, men can divorce for no reason, women can leave, they get more of the cash and prizes on the way out the door, women have their sexual freedom, they can sleep with whoever they want, they can get rid of their young at any age they want with baby deletion. That always led to a collapse 3 generations later. My parents were very old they were older in the 60s. They were middle-aged in the 70s and 80s. And so I would be probably the first generation post-1960s, 1970s. That would be Gen X. Now you look at the next generation, which is millennials. Look how many problems they're having. They brought in the woke. They brought in the DEI. They brought in throwing chaos to the wind with our laws and believing that we have to structure ourselves based on the color of our skin, our belief system in relationships, or whether you identify as a man or a woman. Gen X didn't bring that in. That was the millennials that brought that in, but it was Gen X that raised those lunatics. And now you move on to Gen Z. Gen Z are the most woke. They're the most broke. They're the ones that are entering the workforce now. They're the ones that are joining companies as their media department and as their Twitter department and as their consultants to tell these companies what young people want. And they're the ones causing these companies to go broke, because the companies that are normally listening to the young generation, the hip culture that's coming in that will be their future customers, they've modified themselves to what they're being told this Gen Z wants. Gen Z comes in. They're changing their company for Gen Z, and what's happening? Movie theaters, movie companies going broke. Video game industry going broke. TV, what's the word I'm looking for? Netflix series. All these things that are listening to these Gen Zers, which normally dictate where the culture is going, for one of the first times in history, they are following the current young generation, and they're going broke. And they can't figure out what's going on, not realizing that many millennials, all of Gen X, the vast majority of boomers, they're not on board with this. And ironically, Gen Alpha, the next one's beyond Gen Z, they're not into the woke either. They're seeing how crazy it is, and they're more based than Gen Z. Gen Z is that broken, and I'm not saying all people that are Gen Z, but I'm saying many in that Gen Z that are getting into the corporate world are telling them what they believe to be the truth. And millennials helped along the way. I'm not putting it all on Gen Z, but they're getting into these companies because they went through college and got the woke indoctrination. They're telling these companies what way the country's going, and the country's not going in that direction, and it's all falling apart. And so if we don't get this course correct, which I think might happen in this generation or in this society versus where it collapsed in all the others, is because all the others didn't have a way to gauge society. But we do, and it's called social media. It's called the movies. It's called television. And the companies that are falling off the cliff, we're making fun of them. And we're seeing that they're going broke, that they're going woke and going broke, right? And so the companies might have a way to course correct because they're going to follow the money. And if they course correct because they're following the money, and we hold our course because we are the ones with the money, then the outliers and the weirdos and the most promiscuous and the only fools content creators, they're going to be the outliers. Because yes, there is money there, but it's only going to come from a subset of broken society. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. At least that's how I view this. Anyway, he continues on. The single most influential factor. Surprisingly, the data revealed that the single most important correlation with the flourishing of a culture was whether prenuptial chastity was required or not. It had a very significant effect either way. Going back to pre-1960s, if a woman was easy, which means she just might have made out in the backseat of too many high school boys, she was considered easy. She was damaged goods. Now, women are bragging that they're damaged goods, and if you're a man and you're not okay with her having a body count of 200,
how dare you?
You must be the bad guy. You must be the weak one. How much that has changed in just 60 or 70 years. They say the highest flourishing of culture, the most powerful combination was prenuptial chastity coupled with absolute monogamy, which is really traditional Christian marriage. The woman stays chaste until she gets married, and then there's absolute monogamy between her and a man. That's where the greatest generation was. That's where a large portion of the boomers were. And then it started falling apart during the boomers, and it fell down from there. They say rationalist cultures that retained this combination for at least 3 generations exceeded all other cultures in every area, including literature, art, science, furniture, architecture, engineering, and agriculture. Only 3 out of the 86 cultures studied ever attained this level. What were those 3 cultures? Well, that was Europe. That was, mostly all of Europe. That was the United States. Those were high-functioning Christian. Now, I know many of you say, well, I'm not Christian, but it's Christian values that built the United States. It was Christian, or Catholic in many ways, but still Christian values that built Europe. Okay, whether it was Roman Catholics or Christians or Protestants or Baptists, it's the same thing here in the United States. It was those values that built the Constitution, that built the morality that we flourished upon. So even if you say, we're not a Christian nation because, I'm not Christian, you're not Christian, whatever, the values that our government followed with freedoms, our Second Amendment, our First Amendment, those rights being given by God, our Constitution was written in such a way that it did not favor any specific Christian belief, but it left the door open to others to live here. That was, in many, many ways, some think a mistake, that it allowed other infiltration to happen. But those values were based in Christianity. And the biggest value that carried over, that led to the prosperity, was virginity and absolute monogamy. And when those things were paired, that is the highest functioning society we had. And you can look at that in the history of the world, through all the inventions, through all the growth, through all the scientific discovery, through all the discovery around the world with building massive ships and sailing across the ocean to discover other worlds. And when we look at countries or cultures that are very much like, say, Africa, right? Many parts of the African world, some smaller segments of South America, some poor areas in Asia. What are they lacking? Well, in many cases, they're lacking that virginity and that pure monogamy. And that's the tying factor he found between much of this. He says, the effect of abandoning prenuptial chastity. When strict prenuptial chastity was no longer the norm, absolute monogamy, deism, and rational thinking also disappeared within 3 generations. When the chastity was gone and the absolute monogamy was gone, deism left. The belief of a God left. Rational thinking left. Absolute monogamy left. Total sexual freedom. If total sexual freedom was embraced by a culture, that culture collapsed within 3 generations to the lowest state of flourishing, which Unwin describes as inert and at a dead level of conception. It is characterized by people who have little interest in much else other than their own wants and needs. Sound familiar, anybody? At this level, the culture is usually conquered or taken over by another culture with greater societal energy. Do you understand the risks now for Europe, for the United States? This is what many of us see what's going on in Europe, and boy, do we get hate. We get called that we're somehow racist, or we're somehow phobic, or we're somehow anti-Muslim. We're at the inert or dead level of conception. We have total freedom. Men can sleep with whoever they want. Women can sleep with whoever they want. If they procreate, they can delete the child conceived up to and including 9 months because of reasons. Debauchery. It's okay if men sleep with men, women sleep with women. Men can become women, women can become men. That happened in Rome. And that's one of the things that when you look at the similarities, and we call out the similarities, it's the immigration, because there were other cultures that came into this inert, dead culture, and they had more energy to put their culture in the place of the dying or dead one. And that's what happened. That's what happened. And that was part of the collapse. Now you can look at, the inflation, but why is there inflation? Government overspending, giving freebies to the people that demand I want now instead of working harder for the future of tomorrow. Those similarities are here. We have the same sexual freedoms that Rome had. We have the same open borders that Rome had. We have the same influx of people that are more energetic and desire their future the way they want it versus ours, because we're not looking down the road anymore. We're worried about today. And so the influx of migrants into Western Europe, into Italy and France and the UK and Ireland is diluting and destroying an already dead society, because that society has embraced the woke and the promiscuous and the debauchery. And his studies have said this 190 years before we're actually here today. And his study is still proving to be true today. They say time lag. If there's a change in sexual constraints, either increased or decreased restraints, the full effect of that change is not realized until the third generation. So even if today we're seeing the effects, the millennials and the Gen Zers are seeing the effects of that break, it's going to take another 3 generations to get out of it if we're going to be the first generation to reverse it. But so far to date, zero cultures have been able to reverse it. They've only declined until collapse or conquer. But if we are going to reverse it, Gen Alpha is the first one, the youngest now. They're the first ones that are in the aptitude and ability to reverse it. Ironically, Gen Alpha is not participating on dating apps. They're starting to try to meet people in person. Gen Alpha cares about body count. Gen Alpha isn't drinking as much alcohol. Gen Alpha isn't enjoying the recreational substances that we have as much. Gen Alpha is more worried about conservatism, and they voted higher for conservative values than progressives. Gen Alpha may be the turn that we need to correct this. The problem is we're really going to know how this pans out when the greatest generation, which is basically almost gone, and the boomers and their votes, the boomers' votes for the conservative, for the restraints, when their votes topple off, and then it's Gen X at the top of the alive heap, as it were, and when it's Gen X and then the millennials, and then Gen Z, and then Gen Alpha, and then whatever comes after that, and whatever comes after that. When we lose the voting power of the boomers that are still quite conservative in many ways, that'll determine where we're going to go as a country. And the same thing, and I'm speaking here in the United States, but the same thing goes for Australia and Europe and Canada and all these westernized countries that have been taken over by this debauchery, the loss of chastity, and the progressivism. We're going to see where this turns, all based on Gen Alpha, at least as described by J.D. Unwin. He says, how does this compare with our culture today? I got ahead of myself because now he's going to tell us. He said Unwin published his findings in 1934, long before the sexual revolution that occurred in the West. We now have an opportunity to test his conclusions by observing if our own culture is following the predicted pattern. Unwin's generation appears to be approximately 33 years, so it should take about a century for us to see the cultural changes to take full effect. But we are far enough along in the process that we should be able to observe certain predicted effects. Prior to the sexual revolution, which began in the 1960s, prenuptial chastity was still held in strong regard by Western culture, but starting in the 1970s, premarital sexual freedom became increasingly acceptable. By the early 2000s, the majority of teens were sexually active to the extent that remaining a virgin until marriage was regarded with disbelief, if not ridicule. At the same time, our culture moved from a social norm of absolute monogamy to modified monogamy, and even that is falling apart to this day. As far as the remaining celibate until marriage, 1 in 33 women, or roughly 3%, are chaste until marriage today. And that is hit with scrutiny. That tells you which direction we're going. He said, thanks to the rationalist generations that preceded them, the first generation of a society setting aside its sexual restraints can still enjoy its newfound freedom before any significant decline in culture. But the data shows this having your cake and eating it too phase lasts a maximum of 1 generation before the decline sets in. So that those that enjoyed the 60s and 70s and that liberation, which would have been the generation before me or the boomer generation, they can have their cake and eat it too, meaning they could participate in having the fun and their new freedom, but not to the extent it's destroyed the culture. Those of you that hate boomers, does this sound about right? They enjoyed the low prices, they enjoyed the home availability, they enjoyed the good jobs and the good wages, and they still got to have their freedoms and their breaking down of the traditional norms because the other generations that became before them built things up to such a great extent they could enjoy both. But the generation after them, the Gen Xers, we started feeling that effect. And then the millennials really felt it. And who did they blame? They blamed the boomers because the boomers had it all. And then whatever came behind them was destruction. In many ways, that is panning out to be true, even according to Unwin's theory. They say the history of these societies consists of a series of monotonous repetitions, and it's difficult to decide which aspect of the story is the most significant. The lamentable lack of original thought which in each case the reformers displayed, or the amazing clarity in which, after a period of intense compulsory continence or sexual restraint, the human organism seizes the earliest opportunity to satisfy its innate desires in a direct or perverted manner. Sometimes a man has been heard to declare that he wishes both to enjoy the advantages of high culture and to abolish compulsory continence. The inherent nature of the human organism, however, seems to be such that these desires are incompatible and even contradictory. The reformer may be likened to the foolish boy who desires both to keep his cake and to consume it. Any human society is free to choose either to display great energy or to enjoy sexual freedom. The evidence is that it cannot do both for more than 1 generation. In other words, we can't be prosperous and invent the car and invent the airplane and go to the moon and do the things. And we can't invent and grow as a society and have our energy to enjoy sexual freedoms and dating and putting our energy towards that. There is not enough human energy or enough human will to do both. So we must do one or the other. So, that being said, looking at our society today, men are worried about just surviving. Men are worried about, how am I going to date in this world? How am I going to get a girlfriend? I can't get a girl to look my way. How am I going to sleep with a woman without paying for it? How am I going to get a family? How's all this going to work out for me? And if their energy is focused on that, they're not focusing on bettering the world, on being a better man, on being a healthy man, on being a stoic, good man for society. They get pulled down into the gutter trying to chase after these damn easy women and putting their energy towards that. How many men wasted energy on red pill content and how to date women and how to jump through hoops and how to that's a lot of energy instead of bettering themselves. He said, looking at our own revolution, having your cake and eating it too phase would have lasted into the early 2000s. We are now at a stage where we should begin to observe the verification or falsification of Unwin's predictions. Unwin found that when strict prenuptial chastity was abandoned, absolute monogamy, deism, and rational thinking disappeared within 3 generations of the change in freedoms. So how are we doing? As predicted, absolute monogamy has already been replaced with modified monogamy. And that's, of course, common law relationships, divorce, living with each other, etc. Deism is already rapidly declining, exactly as predicted. Prior to the 1960s, a combination of rationalism and a belief in God was the norm. Not only has a belief in God greatly decreased since the 1960s, but there's been a trend to remove the concept of God from government, the education system, the public forum. Those who still believe in God sense a strong societal pressure to keep deistic beliefs private. In its place is a surprising rise in superstition, and, of course, the belief in the government in and of itself taking place. The swiftness in which rational thinking declined after the 70s is astounding. In its place arose postmodernism, characterized by skepticism, subjectivism, or relativism, a general suspicion of reason. But it gets worse. Postmodernism is giving way to post-truth. In direct contrast to rational thinking, a post-truth culture abandons shared objectives and standards for truth and instead stands on appeals to feelings and emotions and what one wants to believe. Boy, does that sound familiar. Now, I understand some of you are making fun of my English reading. He's writing in 1930s English, which is before we all became stupid. So he's using big words. He's using words that we don't normally use in our vernacular today. Let me just put it that way. But what is he saying? He's saying we're now past the point to where we're beyond post-truth. And we've lost the standard objective for truth. And it's more about identity and emotions and feelings. That would be my truth. I identify as blank. I think I'm a man. I think I'm a woman. I'm actually a minority, but my culture is this, so you can't criticize me, and my truth is the only truth instead of a subjective truth. The subjective truth would be a man is a man, a woman is a woman. But now this new truth is I can be whatever I want, and you need to accept it, or you're a phobe. And he predicted this. That's what's so amazing. He predicted this back almost 100 years ago. People can now identify themselves as something which flat out contradicts science and rational thinking, and in many cases receive the full support and backing of governments and the educational system. Not only do people feel they have a right to believe what they want, but any challenge to that belief, even if supported by truth and logic, is unacceptable and offensive. Here's a quote from Unwin that has become particularly apropos to the last couple decades since our own revolution. If I were asked to define a sophist, I should describe him as a man whose conclusion does not follow from his premise. Sophistry is appreciated only by those among whom human entropy is disappearing. They mistake it for sound reasoning. It flourishes among the people who have extended their sexual opportunity after a period of intense compulsory continence. So what's the summary? For the first part of the 1900s, mainstream Western culture was rationalist and experienced enormous technological advances. From horse and buggy to cars, from hot air balloons to supersonic airplanes and spacecraft landing people on the moon. Maybe. That's my maybe, not the writer's maybe. From our slide rules to computers. Unwin's three main predictions, the abandonment of rationalism, deism, and absolute monogamy are all well underway, which makes the ultimate prediction appear to be credible. The collapse of Western civilization in the third generation, somewhere in the last third of this century, which would be basically 2066 through 2099. Will our culture be the exception? He says, I suppose we can hope, but there's always a tendency to want to believe it can't happen to us. Unwin describes this attitude as a pardonable egocentricity and a quaint and comfortable doctrine that flat lies in the face of the data, or flies in the face of the data, which indicate that the pattern of decline happens with monotonous regularity. That's another way of saying the insanity is doing the same thing yet again, but expecting different results. The primary predictions are already unfolding with alarming all clarity. Now, when you look at a society and look at some of the studies, whether it's Ash's conformity, whether it's the mouse utopia, whether it's many of the other studies that I've talked about on this channel over the years, all of them pointed to the same thing. At the end, there is a termination or an end to the society that is participating in these events. I have a very strong feeling that in the Western countries, Europe, United States, perhaps to some degree, Australia, I think that if they continue their ways of allowing the debauchery, allowing the societal collapse that we see today, and incentivizing open borders so that a society that does have some form of monogamy, granted it's poly-driven, which is multiple wives and one man, but they do have a strong belief in a deity. They do have a strong belief in a marriage system. They do have strong belief in chastity up till marriage, even if the marriage is of people of young age. If the Europeans keep their borders open, and I think with the influx of the migrants that they're seeing, especially from the Muslim world, they're now holding elections, and in Muslim communities or Muslim majority communities in Europe, they are electing Muslims to the government, which will only incentivize them to let more Muslims in. I believe the decline of the West will come within my lifetime, within the next 40 years. Hopefully I live to be a ripe old 95-year-old joker. I believe it'll come within my lifetime, and I'll believe it'll come to the hands of the Middle East. It'll be slower here probably in the United States because we're not attached to the Middle East directly. But we're already starting to see it in Minnesota and other areas, and we're definitely seeing it in Europe, especially in the UK, where we're seeing now certain, I don't know if that you call them counties or what you call them, but we're starting to see it in certain areas where the Muslims now are the majority, and they're now electing more Muslims, and they're talking about putting in Sharia law, that in their counties of these countries, putting in Sharia law inside the UK. And the UK, instead of pushing back, instead of fighting, is celebrating diversity, is celebrating the they-thems. Their focus is not on the ball. They're a dying culture. I think it'll happen first in the UK, maybe Ireland as well. France has got a real good, strong leg up, and Italy's headed that path too. I think they're going to be the canary in the coal mine. The problem is, though, by the time we see them collapse, we'll be already too far in, and our collapse will be inevitable. So for the youngest amongst us, you're going to have your work cut out for you in pushing back against both the broken marriage system, which it means you're not going to participate in it. And granted, they say that's part of the problem, but until they fix it, we're going to have to force the crazies to fix it by not participating in it. And we're going to have to fix society in and of itself by holding up standards for ourselves, not worrying about the women, and worrying about bettering ourselves and our fellow man. We're going to have to circumvent the craziness. I honestly believe that. Lastly, I'll leave it with this. I know I'm going a little long today. I try to keep it around an hour, but I know I'm at an hour and a half. I'll leave it at this. I want you guys to be strong and healthy. I want you to be prepared for what is up and coming. And just because everything falls down around you and everything falls apart around you, it doesn't mean you need to give up. At least take care of yourself. I myself, I'm re-entering fasting. I suggest you look into it. I think it's a gift that has been given to us by nature, whether you believe that from a religious standpoint or from a intelligence, biological, our body knows how to take care of itself and fix itself. Please look into fasting. I will be re-entering my fasting phase now that we're past the holidays. Look into eating healthier foods. Watch your diet. Start looking at ways to filter your water, either by charcoal or by osmosis, to get the chemicals and the things out of there that may make it through a charcoal system. Look at the foods especially. I think that is a big one. And a thank you to my guest, Antonio. He did want me to pass this along to you, the turkesterone, the NMN. I do now have those products. I am taking them. I'm hoping, I feel better than I have in a very long time now that I've started this. So he is sending that promo code on to you guys. I might suggest looking into it. Don't necessarily take my word or his word for it. Look into these products, especially the NMN, I think is a big one that's really gaining ground. And I also suggest that you look into Anthony or Dr. Andrew Huberman. He was on Joe Rogan. He did a segment on this. He talks about it. I will just play this, hopefully as a teaser, for you to start looking into this stuff for yourself.
But there's a category of supplements that are very interesting that for most people who aren't exploring testosterone augmentation for sport work very well to increase testosterone by about 100 to 200 points. Not, 300, not a tripling or anything like that. And the main ones are two substances. One is called Tongat Ali.
Oh yeah, that stuff's real, huh?
Yeah. Oh yeah, because what happens is the testosterone molecule, it's basically carried in a cargo. So it can be in its free form, unbound form, free testosterone. And everyone says, I want more free testosterone. You want more, but these what are called sex hormone binding globulins. So there's something called sex hormone binding globulin and albumin. They carry the testosterone molecule to the different tissues of the body. So you don't want all your testosterone free. You want some of it bound up so that it can be delivered to the different tissues, including your brain. About 400 milligrams per day has the effect of raising free testosterone and overall testosterone by about 100 to 200 points. And so we're not talking about full TRT or blasting, or now that I'm always amused on YouTube, they now call it sports TRT. That's when you get above 200 milligrams per week. So
sports?
This is basically, you've got TRT, which is typically about 200 milligrams per week.
Now, he goes on to talk about TRT a little bit, which is not recommended until you hit a certain age because it'll actually turn off your testosterone in your body, which is not a good idea if you're a young, healthy man. You want to boost it, not turn it off.
Okay,
milligrams.
That makes sense.
Right.
So it would be 2 on that, and that's 200 milligrams.
That's right. So, okay, so as long as we're going down this path.
I thought you were saying like 2 full syringes.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think that a lot of people who think they need TRT, when I hear about guys in their 20s and 30s, look, I'm in my mid-40s, and I can tell you that you can get and maintain very healthy testosterone levels without TRT if you do the right things, the behaviors, the nutrition, all the other stuff early on. There's sometimes people who have hypogonadal syndromes and things like that.
There's a lot of...
So anyway, the full segment, this is a 10-minute clip from Powerful JRE. Look, I'm not saying you got to do things just the way I want, but I'm telling you now, we are looking down the barrel of societal collapse. And we're not in a place really where we can do too much about it, except a couple of things. Number one, the first thing we can do, which I think is most important, is vote with your dollars. Give your money to corporations and businesses and local farmers and local food producers, and get away from the chemical-induced food, get away from the crap foods. Vote with your dollar that way. That will help. It'll help you directly, and it'll incentivize corporations to put out healthy food. Number two, vote with your dollar when it comes to the movies and to the companies that you give your money to, right? Whether it's the DEI and the woke video games and the movies and things like that. Don't give them money anymore. It only incentivizes the depravity. Give it to companies that support good values, that support family, that support fixing the marriage system and the divorce racket that we've got going on, that look to fixing women's issues, that work to fixing the family. Give it to companies that support the right message. Support governments. Now, I'm very anti-government. just let me precursor that. I wish all government bigger than my local mailman went away. But if they're going to be doing the right thing, whether it's left or right in your country, left or right, if there's one that's supporting men, health, family, even if it's religion and you're not into religion, at least when we had a religious belief system in this country, it stopped the depravity. And now that traditional religion is gone from many countries, no matter what it was, they're looking to government. They're looking to woke ideology. That is the new government. DEI is the new belief system. That there, with an absence of religion, they will find a new one. In communism, it is the government. In our current stance, it is the DEI and the wokeism. Do everything you can as an individual man not to be part of the system. I'm not saying go get married and have kids and all that. Don't be part of the system. Be without the system. Stay out from the system, and your participation in the system should steer it in the right direction. So maybe think of, instead of being on a ship heading towards an iceberg, think of yourself as in the water with a rope, paddling furiously, trying to steer the boat in a different direction. But if that boat hits the iceberg, you can let go of that rope and just swim away. And just swim away and separate yourself from the madness. That's the best way I can put it. So I hope this helps you. I know it helps me. It reminds me to be on track. It reminds me to fix my health. You can see my little chipmunk cheeks and me getting fat and a little soft. This is a reminder for myself as well. I hope you guys join me and maybe bettering yourselves in a way that betters you, betters society in ways that you choose to interact with it, but that you better yourself. At least do that much, and then vote with your dollars to steer maybe things back in the right direction. And if it doesn't, put yourself in a place where you'll be okay if it's not.